Welcome. Today, our speakers is Dr. Mukerrem Miftah. We can start officially. And today's topic also is identity and politics in the Horn of Africa. Dr. Mukerrem Miftah, let me introduce Dr. Mukerrem Miftah. He's assistant professor of policy studies, School of Policy Studies at Ethiopian Civil Service University, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Before joining the university, he had served as an assistant professor of African Studies at Social Sciences University of Ankara in Turkey. He received his PhD in Civilization Studies from Ibn Khaldun University in Turkey. Dr. Mukerrem's dissertation has just been published as a book, Crossing the Border Between Religion and Civilization, Trends and Cases in the Study of Islamic and Western Civilizations. Currently, apart from teaching at Ethiopian, Dr. Mukerrem also heads a think tank called Ethiopia Center for Strategic Studies and the CEO of Advanced Center for Consultancy and Training in Addis Ababa. Dr. Mukerrem consulted many institutions as Ethiopia's House of Federation and NGOs on diversity management, peace building, and religion. His research and publications revolve around the political sociology of religion, Islam, identity politics, and the notion of civilization in the Horn of Africa. Dr. Mukerrem regularly contributes to and appears as African analyst on local media outlets and others such as Chinese CGTN and Turkey's TRT World. Welcome, Dr. Miftah Mukerrem, and really we are very honored to see you in our program. Identity and politics in the Horn of Africa. I think topic is very relevant in today's politics in the region, especially the Horn of Africa is the most dynamic place in the region. And in the world politics also, the region has a very special place. International actors and regional actors and the states are actively engaged in politics, in the Horn of Africa. Also, recently in Ethiopia, the political crisis in Tigray, and Somalia also has been facing security crisis, identity crisis for a long time. In addition, in 2011, Sudan was divided, and South Sudan and Sudan still there is a significant nexus of identity and politics in these countries. So, you are expert, and we would like to understand what's the nexus between identity and politics, and so why identity politics is important in the region. Recently, white states have been focused on the militarized identity politics rather than civil identity. Also, of course, I think about this topic is also quite a very broad topic. So we can put many things inside the topic, but because of the time problem and because of the focus on the main topics, we would like to listen. I think I should talk more because of short time. Yes, dear Dr. Mukerrem Miftah, right now it is you can start for talking.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdurrahim Hojam. I think the issue of identity and politics in the Horn of Africa, I mean, in Africa in general and in the context of the Horn of Africa, is one of the most contested with significant ramifications for the political order, for citizens who are living in this part of Africa. So let me start by really making some operational definitions, meaning a sort of delimiting the notion which I will be addressing in the course of my discussions. So the issue of identity is one of the most, I guess, blurred notions, concepts in the study of Africa in general, meaning African studies, and anthropology and sociology. So identity has always been studied with different, school of thought, paradigms, and theoretical frameworks. But a glimpse at these literatures that we can articulate or talk about three major theories which articulate identity in general. Now, the first school, or I would say theory, which engages identity is the constructivist school of thought, which considers identity, meaning individual or group identity, as something that can be constructed. Because since human beings are part and parcel of a given social order, meaning they are part of one cultural group. So that cultural group may have its own norms, values, customs, traditions, folklores, and rituals. So through which we learn the way how we think about ourselves and our group, our country, and so on and so forth. So through enculturation, people learn to have an identity. So they construct an identity. So this way, individuals as well as communities and groups develop their collective identity. So this is one way of really approaching identity, and they think that since it's constructed, it can be deconstructed, meaning that you can challenge it, or exposure to different culture can help you in some ways to question your identity and reconstruct back again, meaning it passes through construction, and it may have an exposure, an experience, or a rupture where it can be deconstructed, and you can really reconstruct back individuals or groups' identity. So this is the first theory which says identity. Now, the second school of thought is a theory which considers identity as something constructed, but the relevancy, the importance of identity becomes significant only because of circumstances, meaning circumstances make identity relevant. In other words, people may have multiple identities, let's say. As a human being, for instance, I am a human being, I am a male, I am an Ethiopian by, let's say, country, color, somehow brown colored. I belong to one ethnic group in Ethiopia. I have a different religious view. So as an individual, I have multiple identities. And these identities, according to the instrumentalist school of thought, people or individuals or groups tend to instrumentalize their identity depending on the public sphere, conditions in the public sphere, meaning some academics or political elites can instrumentalize individuals or groups' identity to a certain end, in many cases, political or economic ends. So in this situation, the view is that identity is multiple, it's not necessarily unique, and the importance of identity becomes significant when it is being used by elites. Elites meaning small in number, who have certain capital, meaning cultural capital, social capital, human capital, or religious capital. So these are elites who have these capitals and exercise influence. So an elite, they are smaller in number, basically, and they have a capital, certain capital, as I have pointed out earlier. It could be economic capital, cultural capital, religious elders, for instance, or religious leaders, political elites, academicians, and scholars. All of them have certain capital. So using that capital, that they can exercise certain influence in mobilization and directing communities and groups for social change, for instance. So because of that, the instrumentalist school of identity is largely elite-centric view of identity. So this is a second view of identity, meaning identity becomes relevant. People have multiple identities, but its relevancy, its importance depends largely on how elites decide to use it. Now, the third theoretical framework or school of thought is the school of primordial construction of identity. In this school, identity is perceived as a relatively fixed state of being, a fixed trait. Once it's constructed, it can be difficult to deconstruct it or reconstruct again. In other words, they say that people, let's say, once you have certain identity as let's say as an ethnic group, that ethnic group, which in many ways defines who you think you are, is fixed, meaning let's say as a member of one particular ethnic group or cultural group, your cultural group not only have material, non-material cultures, but members of that community, that ethnic group, are related by blood. So your identity is being traced by, let's say, your father's, I think you already know that classical anthropologists talked about the issue of a matriarchal society where women were leaders and human beings' identity, individual group identity, were traced through their women side. But contemporary, I think, scholarship doesn't necessarily really accept this view. So because of this, in the context of the primordial school of thought, human beings can have an identity, and in many cases that identity have blood foundations, consanguineal relationships between members of that ethnic group. So because of that, they say you cannot change your identity, or it's largely impossible for a group or individual's identity to be changed. Now, I know that this is not the most contemporary and influential school of thought. When we compare the three school of thought which examines identity, the most popular one is the first two theories, meaning the constructivist school is very powerful, and most importantly, and the most commanding theory at this particular point in time is the school of instrumentalists, because nowadays in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and even Europe, individuals as well as groups' identity are being manipulated, influenced, and mobilized by elites. So instrumentalist school of theory largely explains human identity. So this is, I think, a general glimpse at what we call an identity. Identity politics is a crossroad, the intersection between politics. I think you guys are all from the political science department. Politics in general, I think, engage, among other things, influence, leadership, and things of that, power, authority, legitimacy. All of these notions have, in one or another, significant relations with group existence, social existence, and in many cases, human beings who live in groups and in social gatherings as communities, they have identities. That identity can be ethnic, religious, and so on and so forth. So politics, individuals who engage communities, let's say community leaders in non-industrial societies. In other words, let's say there are hunters and gatherers. These are communities. Pastoralists, they are communities. Nomads, these are communities. Their form of leadership, their political organization is largely different in many ways from the modern nation-state political organization, as you guys already know. These individuals symbolize the group to which they belong, meaning as member of that particular identity group, they share the cultures, the norms, the values, the religious belief systems, and at times they are also related through blood. They have consanguineal relations with them. So in the context of pre-modern societies, political organization has always been largely dependent upon the identity of the groups. So politicians, political leaders, elderly leaders, and let's say monarchs, even early in the past, before the advent of the nation state, I think since the 20th century onwards, I think it was before the 17th century, we know that the political organizations all around the world were largely, monarchical, and people tend to lead communities and groups by virtue of being a member of one religious group. Let's say, even in the context of Ethiopia, before the advent of the socialist regime under Mengistu Haile Mariam, Ethiopia was led by a monarchy. And in those conditions, in those times, the people who were the leaders, kings, they used to rule the Ethiopian society or the larger part of the Horn of Africa by virtue of being a member of an Orthodox, Toharo church, first believers, followers, and also by virtue of being born out of a very respected ethnic group. They call it the Solomonic dynasty, which, according to their narrations, it goes back to, or it dates back to the Prophet Solomon. Prophet Solomon is a well-known personality in the monotheistic religions in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So these leaders, they justify their political legitimacy, leadership, and power because of their ethnicity, because of their religious affiliations, and related associated things. But in the modern period, I think, following the advent of the socialist regime in Ethiopia, individuals who came to rule, who garner their legitimacy through the pogroms policy that they provide, or sometimes by force, they make individuals, groups, and communities. I would say they enslave individuals. Individuals are not citizens. So the source of legitimacy is not necessarily ethnicity or religion. And one particular character of a modern nation state, as you all are senior researchers in the field, it's more of meritocratic. But early in the past, under the monarchical rule, or even among the pre-modern societies, hunters and gatherers, or pastoralists, nomads, political leadership largely owes to ethnic membership, religious affiliation, and the cultural capital that they have. All these justified politics. So in other words, identity politics has been a very important notion early in the past, meaning before the advent of the modern nation state, because it determined political organizations, political leadership, how to exercise influence, how to garner legitimacy. All these conditions were significantly wrapped up with group identity. So identity was very significant. Now, nowadays, I think since the 20th century onwards, the issue of identity is now becoming a serious cause of concern after the collapse of, well, basically one of the reasons why the USSR was, collapsing, partly because of the notion of identity. In terms of national identity, by the way, there are, I think, three major identities insofar as groups are concerned. One is an ethnic identity. These are group identities, basically. So you have an ethnic identity. The second one is religious identity, and the third one is national identity. The three are relevant notions as far as identity policy is concerned. Now, although before the 20th century, the religious identity and ethnic identity were relatively dominant in parts of, let's say, the identity politics is very much important, partly because it has a lot to do with group identity in terms of ethnicity or religion. So before the advent of the modern nation state, political order, leadership, legitimacy, authority, all these were fundamentally linked, significantly linked with individuals' affiliation with certain arrangements, social groupings. That link can be ethnic or religious in many cases. But now in the modern period, at least on paper, or at least at the discourse level, people are talking about a secular state, state which the state apparatus, the individuals, the political leaders, political elites, they don't necessarily manipulate or use religious identity or group identity. They are supposed to be neutral. They are supposed to be serving communities and citizens, not one religious group or one ethnic group. Otherwise, the issue of discrimination, stereotype, ethnocentrism, and things of that sort can be brought. But in practice, so the point which I was making so far is on theoretical level, but in actual sense, from empirical experiences, political groups, even party politics, political leaders, president, ministers in many parts of the world, not just only in Africa or Asia or Latin America, even in Europe, we are hearing in some ways the power of ethno-nationalism being a recent trend which commands significant, followership among citizens in different parts of the world. So the point that I'm trying to get across to you is what? Identity politics, meaning politics based on identity, ethnic, religious, or other, even though it was dominant early in the past, it was relatively not significant after I would say, after the collapse of let's say, the USSR, or I would say from the 20th century onwards, political leadership, political legitimacy, authority were less linked, in my perspective, less directly linked with these identity markers. But nowadays, in the 21st century, identity is now playing a significant role in political, mobilization, political leadership, in exercising, influence. It's now becoming one of the sources of legitimacy. So because of that, I think identity politics is very much important and alive nowadays in the 21st century. And this becomes more significant in the context of Africa, particularly the Horn of Africa. Now, let me move on to talk about the Horn of Africa, and then I think we will have a session where we will exchange ideas and then experiences. The Horn of Africa is part of the East Africa, and the Horn of Africa. These three words signify four countries: Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, and Djibouti. These are part of the Horn of Africa. And there is another notion, another epistemic category, which we call the Greater Horn of Africa. The Greater Horn of Africa includes, in addition to these four countries, it includes Uganda, Kenya, South Sudan. Yeah, so these are the members of the Greater Horn of Africa. Now, identity politics has always been one of the most fundamental predictors of, let's say, political stability, political organizations, even state independency, were all fundamentally informed by identity politics, meaning some ethnic groups can come out and would say that we have been oppressed for centuries and therefore we need our own independent nation states, like South Sudan, from Sudan, yeah? From Eritrea, members of the Eritrean community, they were claiming the same thing, that they were oppressed, they were not given equal chance and opportunity in Ethiopia's economic and political sphere. And also the same is a serious cause of concern among members of the Somali ethno-political religious grouping who are located in the offshores of the Red Sea, meaning you have at least four related Somalis in the Horn of Africa. You have Somaliland, whose capital is Hargeisa, and you have Somali Republic, which we know is based in Mogadishu, and there is Somalians living in Djibouti. Almost half of the people of Djibouti are Somalians, and the other half are, I think, people of Afar, and also so significant proportion of Somalis are also living now in Ethiopia's Ogaden region. And one of the reasons why they're not uniting, among other factors, is the issue of ethnocentric tendencies. Also, it's not only ethnocentric problems, but also the role of foreign influence is significant, meaning the neighboring countries and the countries from, let's say, the United States and other countries. All these have their foundations in identity politics. If we begin from South Sudan, we know that, I think, let me move from South Sudan to I think Ethiopia. I'm not going to really gauge all the Horn of African countries because time would not permit us. And I think these two countries can give us good example scenarios how identity politics defines a nation, a state. Now, from South Sudan, we know that political elites, including Salva Kiir, Riek Machar, and many other ethnic ethnically mobilizing political forces and political elites. The issues that they were raising were, among others, included ethnocentrism. The South Sudanese used to claim that North Sudanese were largely more of brown colored and more Arab, but the South Sudanese were not necessarily brown colored. They are not Arabs. They are more dark colored, black natives, as they say. And in terms of religion, the North Sudanese were significantly Muslims. More than 90% they are Sunni Muslims. But the South Sudanese have not been Muslims, and most of them were traditional religious, animistas, and some of them, after the colonial experience by the United Kingdom, the British, some of them have adapted Catholicism and Protestantism. And these individuals are now, by the way, they are becoming more powerful in the South Sudanese political sphere because they get significant support from the NGOs which operate in South Sudan, who are being really financed by interest groups from the United States and England. So some of the reasons that informed the independence movement for South Sudanese were, one, ethnicity. As I said, they claim that there has always been ethnocentrism, that they were discriminated based on their race, discriminated based on religion, and they opted for an independent republic for South Sudan. And I think they are able to garner it, but unfortunately, one of the problems of identity politics is you do not stop at getting your independence, meaning after you get your independence from, let's say, from North Sudan, South Sudan is again divided into two, the one led by Salva Kiir and the other one by Riek Machar. The other one represents one major ethnic group called the Dinka ethnic group, and Riek Machar represents, and the other ethnic group, the Nuer. Nuer and Dinka are the two major ethnic groups in South Sudan. By the way, some members of the Nuer ethnic group are also living in Ethiopia's southwestern part of Ethiopia. Now, they live in Ethiopia, meaning as an Ethiopians, the Nueri ethnic groups, they live in Ethiopia. But since the cross-border interaction is very much fluid, they can go to South Sudan and engage in economic activity, and sometimes they engage in battles and they fight between themselves. So in any case, identity politics, in many cases, which underpins economic and political injustice, which informs the movement, political movement, I think was one of the reasons why South Sudan came to have its own independence. Now, even though they got their independence, I think in 2011, officially recognized by the United Nations, still the country is not really a well-functioning country. There are hundreds of thousands of problems really making the country a living hell for the communities and for the neighboring countries in the Horn of Africa. Now, apart from that, Ethiopia, since its inception, I think you already know that Ethiopia is one of the ancient nation, I wouldn't say nation state, but a state which has a long history, pre-colonial history, which dates back to, according to some historians, Ethiopia as a country has some 3,000 to 6,000 history of independence, a history of monarchy, a history of political leadership in the Horn of Africa, and also part of, their leadership has extended to include part of Yemen. Today's Yemen, south of Yemen was part and parcel of Ethiopia's or the Al-Habash or Habashistan political organization in the past. So even though Ethiopia, unlike many of the African countries, including the Horn of Africa, was an independent state for centuries, there has always been questions by different ethnic groups in the country, which after 1991 came to have their own regional statehood within Ethiopia, meaning the people of Oromo, the people of Afar, the people of Somalia, the people of Tigray, the people of Harari. There are about Sidama, I think there are now close to 11 ethnic groups in Ethiopia's territory, meaning Ethiopia is no longer one, coherent state where there is one religion and ethnicity. I think that's no longer the case nowadays. Nowadays, Ethiopia as a country, even the constitution recognizes that there are about 85 and 86 language-speaking ethnic groups in the country, even though the dominant ethnic groups are, I think there are some, not more than 5, meaning the other 80, the other 60 or 50 ethnic groups, they are not significant in number. They are maybe in hundreds or even thousands. The leading or the major ethnic group in Ethiopia is called the Oromo ethnic group. I think they are about some 35% of the Ethiopian ethnic group are the Oromo ethnic group. They speak Cushitic language. The other ethnic group is the Amhara ethnic group. The Oromo, I think there are some 50 to 60% of whom are Muslims, according to some estimation, but some others, they contest this classification. They say that the people of Oromo, half of them are Muslims, half of them are Christians. But many of them, they think that the people of Oromo are, many of them, at least 60% of them are Muslims. In terms of religion, they live in the south central part of Ethiopia. The other ethnic group is the people of Somalia. The Somalis live in Ethiopia. They have, thousands of years historical interaction with Ethiopia. I mean, members of the ethnic groups within Ethiopia. I think they are about, I don't know, 5 to 6 million, maybe 7 million. I haven't seen the recent statistics. The Somali, all the Somali, not only the Ethiopia, but all the Somali, including Somaliland, Somalis live in Djibouti, the Somali who live in Puntland or Hargeisa or Somali, Mogadishu, they are part of the Cushitic linguistic family. More than 95% they are, I think, Muslims, and in terms of Islamic legal traditions, they belong to the Shafi'i fiqh school of thought. In terms of ethnicity, the Somali, all the Somalis, I mean the Somali from Djibouti to Puntland, which includes Ethiopian Ogaden, they belong to an ethnic group called the Dir ethnic group. It's one of them. There is Darood, there is Hawiye, there is Isa, and there are others as well. There are about 5 to 6 ethnic groups, but the most dominant ethnic groups from these range of ethnic groups in Somalia, many of the leaders in Somalia, they belong to Darood or Hawiye in many cases, but the others also were leaders in different times and places. Another ethnic group in Somalia is the people of Tigray. The Tigray, they belong to the Semitic linguistic family. Semitic linguistic family includes the Arabs, the Hebrew. So the language is very much related, significantly related with the language of Arabs and Hebrew. In terms of religion, the Tigray, they are, in my assessment as a student of religion and politics in the Horn of Africa, I would say they are the most conservative Orthodox Christians in the Horn of Africa. The most conservative Orthodox Christians in the Horn of Africa. Next to them is the people of Amhara. The Amhara are also Orthodox Christians. They constitute about 25% of the Ethiopian population. The people of Tigray, I think, by the way, the TPLF, which came to rule Ethiopia since 1991, I would say, they are from the people of the people of Tigray, meaning they call themselves Tigray People Liberation Front, but they organized, they created a platform wherein different ethnic groups were represented, but they were the leaders of that political arrangement. That political arrangement is known as the, we call it in Amharic, Ihadig, or the Ethiopian Revolutionary Democratic Front. It was a political coalition. It was constructed, led, dominated by the TPLF. So the TPLF are political elites who originated in Tigray. So the people of members of the Tigray were, I would say, were very much politically dominant for the last 3 decades in Ethiopia. Unfortunately, that was changed since 2018 because of a political transition that took place in Ethiopia. Okay, another ethnic groups, I will talk about the political transitions later on. Other ethnic groups included the Southern People and Nations group, which included the people of Gurage, Hadiya, Sidama, Walaita. These are ethnic groups. Their number ranges from 2 to 5 million. They have their own language, their own cultural arrangements, their own system of religious beliefs. Well, many of them, I would say, are largely Muslims and Protestant Christians, meaning the people of, I would say, they are about, in my rough estimation, they are about some 25 to 30% of the Ethiopian population live in the southern part of Ethiopia. The southern part of Ethiopia, it's not one ethnic group. Like earlier, as I said, there is an Oromo ethnic group, yeah, and an Oromo, they are larger in number, but also homogeneous, and they command significant power and in terms of politics and economic engagement in the country. But the southern part of Ethiopia, even the constitutional affiliation, the constitutional name given to the southern part is called the Southern Peoples, Nations and Nationalities. In other words, there are many ethnic groups. I think in my estimation about 50 ethnic groups, but some 3 to 5 are major ethnic groups, like the Gurage, the people of Walaita, the people of Sidama. There is also another ethnic group called the people of Harari. Harari are, they belong to the eastern part of Ethiopia. Many of them, the Harari, the original settlers, they are called Hararis. Many of them are Muslims, essentially. But through time, the people of Oromo also migrated there, intermarried with the people of Harari, the Harari people. The Gurage also go there, the Amhara also go there. So it's more of an amalgamation, okay? There are multiple identity groups in Harari, but the dominant one is the Harari peoples. So so what I'm trying to make so far is to give you the ethnic map of Ethiopia. So these ethnic groups are nowadays, they lead their own territories. I mean, what we have in Ethiopia is a federal political system, an ethnic federalism. But ethnic groups, they lead their own territory and use their own language. They develop their cultures. They give their educations with their own local language. And that continues to be the case, by the way. But as far as the political elites are concerned, there is a huge political debate, meaning there is unbridled unbridled gap between two major elite groups in Ethiopia, even nowadays. The first group argue for a federal system of political administration for Ethiopia. The other one argues for a unitary system of political organization. But many ethnic groups follow and influenced by the federalist school, and I think they are very much powerful, not only even locally here in Ethiopia, but also in the United States. They live there, but they mobilize different ethnic groups in Ethiopia. So their power and influence is significant, and it makes significant influence in how the political organization is organized and running in Ethiopia.
I'm sorry,
okay.
Dr. Mukerrem, because of time problem, if you kindly conclude your lecture, I would be very happy, because we'll get the questions from our audience, our participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I have given you, I went through much more details, but in any case,
great, yeah.
The point which I was trying to get across to you is what? Identity politics is very much alive and even more powerful in the context of the Horn of Africa. And the most dominant marker of identity politics in Ethiopia has been ethnicity and religion. Ethnic group affiliation makes significant sense. I mean, as a political scientist, as a sociologist, or as a student of African studies, you need to understand identity politics. Otherwise, you will never be able to understand the whole of Africa in general. One of the major factors behind the current political fiasco the current political problem that we have in Ethiopia, in Somalia, in Djibouti. Sorry, not mostly in Djibouti, but there is also a problem in Djibouti between the people of Somalia and Afar, but not significant, meaning compared with Ethiopia, the other Somalia countries, ethnic groups, and South Sudan. The same thing happens in by the way, North Sudan. In North Sudan, different ethnic groups represented by different political elites are still boiling in Sudan. And one of the reasons why the political transition in Sudan aborted is simply because different ethnic groups represented by different political elites were never given the chance to be part of the political transition. The political transition has been dominated by the military, the Transition and Military Council, principally led by Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo and Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, Shamsuddin al-Kabashi. So the military remains a very powerful entity, but it did not recognize identity groups. These identity groups have economic and political injustices, but the political sphere, the political elites who lead, who monopolize the political sphere, they never, they gave them, a blind eye. They never listened to them. So the people of Darfur, they are still, complaining about their conditions, which has a long historical backdrop. People who live in Kordofan, they have their own serious cause of concern. The same thing happens in South Sudan as well. So in other words, simply put, if you are going to study Africa in general, and the Horn of Africa in particular, you need to closely study identity politics in terms of ethnicity and religion. These two factors shaped the way how politics function, political organizations are made. I think this much would be fair enough, I guess.
Right, thank you, dear Dr. Mukerrem Miftah. Really, it was a productive lecture for us, and personally, really, about Horn of Africa, you opened new horizons and understanding the Horn of Africa from different perspective, and more importantly, right, we today realize that again, so that Horn of Africa is indeed the most dynamic place in the continent, not only on the African continent, in the world politics, because of its geopolitical significance in the world. Also, because of time, quickly, I would like to open the another section, answer and question sections, dear Miftah, Dr. Miftah. Yeah, I have a question before I got the questions from our participants, if you don't mind. Well, yes, you studied in Turkey and you finished your PhD in Turkey. And well, also, you finished your PhD from one of the best scholars in Turkey, Professor Recep Şentürk Hoca, right? Well, Turkey also has a unique identity. Well, in in the region and even at the internationally. Well, how do African people perceive of Turkish identity, especially in the Horn of Africa? Maybe it's a very classic question for you, but well, today's topic also is about identity and politics. Well, how do you see that? How do you interpret Turkish identity in the Horn of Africa? Well, if you compare with, for example, China or the Western actors in the Horn of Africa. Briefly, if you don't mind, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have recently finished a draft about the socioeconomics of Ethio-Turkish relations, an overview of 2 decades. I think, I hope by the end of next week it would be, I hope to publish it. God be willing. Yeah. Turkey is a very dominant political force at this point in time in the world, no doubt about that. let me make one short point that global politics in the 21st century has shifted largely from, I think, from the ideological, grouping to more of, I think, value-centered international relations. I think diplomacy and international relations. So in that particular regard, many countries of the world, they are working to reconnect with countries with which they have had their own historical, cultural, religious bonds. So I think Turkey is also using this historical, cultural, and religious backdrop as an important instrument to reconnect with countries which have had a strong ties with, let's say, early in the past with the Ottoman Empire. And since 2002, after the AKP, or the Justice and Development Party, came to power, we know that Afro-Turkish relations, let me put it this way, Afro-Turkish relations have had at least two important episodes in history. The first part is a historical one, meaning it dates back to, I don't know, to the 14th, 15th century, when the Suleiman al-Kanuni, who was a well-known Ottoman leader, who was able to connect and have relations with one of the important Muslim political leaders in the Horn of Africa, known as Ahmed Ibrahim al-Ghazi, a well-known political leader who was able to mobilize different Muslim religious groups in the Horn of Africa in its fight with or against the Christian establishment in Ethiopia, because of what he called entitlement in terms of religious, economic, and political participation and recognition in the context of Ethiopia. So because of these injustices, there was a significant fight between the Christian-led monarch on the one hand, the Ethiopian Muslim forces by the Imam Ahmed Ibrahim al-Ghazi, the Christians, political elites, and the leader at that particular point in time was supported by the Portuguese, who were Catholics, so they were giving support in terms of military equipment and things of that sort to the Christian Empire. And Muslims, they were Islamic sultanates in Ethiopia, which dates back to the 7th, 8th century. We know that Islam got its foot in Ethiopia before it even reached Medina. We know that the Hijrah was made to Ethiopia, and there is a prophetic tradition which clearly stipulates that, meaning there is Al-Malik Al-Adil, meaning there is a just king who rules the Horn of Africa. If you can go there, he would treat you with fairness and justice. So that recognition tells you something, meaning at that particular point in time, the Najashi, or Al-Ashama, was a very powerful political personality who was able to control not only the Horn of Africa, but also as far as south of Yemen. But after him, the political culture, the political organization were largely dominated by Orthodox Christians, and Muslims were resenting. There was fight, snowballing for centuries. So because of that, the Suleiman al-Kanuni sent troops and military equipment to the Imam Ahmed Ibrahim al-Ghazi, who was fighting with Libna Dingil. Libna Dingil was the leader of the Orthodox Christians in Ethiopia. So because of that, the Ottoman Empire have had its own historical links with the Muslims in Ethiopia, Horn of Africa in general. And Habashistan, we call it, the people of Habash, the brown-colored people in the Horn of Africa. So because of that, relations in terms of visitors, religious personalities used to be sent from Istanbul. They used to go to Yemen, and they would come to the eastern part of Ethiopia. And they have still important historical sites in Ethiopia. Many Turks come and visit those places. So they have had these cultural relations with the Horn of Africa, Turks, in the past. Now, the second episode began with since Recep Tayyip Erdogan came to power in 2002, because before Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey was largely, in my perspective, was closed, more of nationalistic. I think the interest and the aspiration were largely focused on nurturing Turkish nationalism, and the political elites, in my reading of Turkish political history, they were more pro-Western, less interested in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. So they were less interacting with the Horn of African countries. But when Recep Tayyip Erdogan came to power, meaning the AKP power, the Justice and Development political group, they started a new episode in Africa Turkish relations in three important major streams. One, in terms of humanitarian aid, in terms of development assistance, and in terms of investment and trade. Turkey is a leading country in Africa. And in fact, Ethiopia is one of the top 2 or 3 countries where significant investment from Turkey is being invested in now. So because of that, the economic relations in terms of humanitarian aid and support from Turkey is significant. And we know that Turkey has been a leading country in the world for about, I don't know, for about 5 or 6 years. Turkey was the leading top 3 countries in the world in terms of humanitarian aid and support globally. So Africa, particularly the Horn of Africa, from the Horn of Africa, Somalia particularly, we're getting significant support from Turkey, and we know that Turkey has rebuilt Somalia, and they are working significantly there. And I think relatively the same thing is happening in Ethiopia as well. So in terms of economic relations, in terms of political diplomacy, the interaction is very much significant, and I think promising. In terms of investment, the trend is very much promising as well. So I would say in general that Turkey-Africa relation is moving in the right direction. You can visibly see this movement in the right direction in Ethiopia and in Somalia particularly.
Thank you, really, I appreciate. Right, dear participants, if you have questions, please, you are welcome. By the way, Dr. Yunus also, he joined the program. Dr. Yunus also is specializing on African politics. Also, he has been to African countries as a researcher, and he also joined. Welcome, dear Dr. Yunus. Right, okay. Dr. Miftah, really, you were a student at Fatih Sultan Mehmet University, and you had a significant experience at my university. Also, last year I joined the university, so I am a new faculty member at the university. So I'm very happy that today you talk about identity and politics as our ex-student. Really, we appreciate, and we know that especially at your university you had also Ethiopian strategic studies. If you don't mind, please could you give us information about your NGO, Ethiopian Civil? It is a government think tank, dear Dr. Mukerrem, or that's non-governmental?
Ethiopia Center for Strategic Studies is an independent. Yes. It's a think tank. I am the director of the board, and it's established by basically Turkish graduates. So right. I have another friend, who graduated from I think Hacettepe University, and then doktorasını almış kardeşimiz vardır. So we established that in the think tank. So it's our own. It's not related to any school, but it's an organized think tank that studies Ethiopia's challenges, economic, political, Muslims' problems, economic, political, injustice, federalism. So we engage in research. We have occasional seminar series. We organize training programs on policy issues. Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, inshallah, dear Dr. Mukerrem, as also ex-student of the Fatih Sultan Mehmet Vakıf University, we would like to cooperate with you, inshallah, more in the coming days. Right. I think time is 3 o'clock, and I think it's time to close. Dear friends, dear colleagues, really thank you so much for coming. And today well, Dr. Miftah, Mukerrem Miftah talk about identity and politics in the Horn of Africa. And inshallah, for our next program, we'll invite different speaker talking about African politics. Right, dear doctor, would you like to say something lastly?
Yeah, I'm glad to have someone who have been from the Muhammad Waqf University. So my initial PhD experience is from Sultan Muhammad Waqf University. So I spent some 2 years there. So the memory is still alive. And thank you for having me to share with you my experience and my ideas on the Horn of Africa and geothermal issues. And I thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, dear colleague, and salams to Ethiopia. And really, we appreciate for your time and for your effort. All the best. Salam.
Okay.
Salam alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you.